Well, today's Friday. Yesterday I told you on the devotion it was Friday, but I was kind of rushing the week, wasn't I? Hope if you have to go to work that you didn't stay home from work because I told you it was Friday yesterday. Anyway, we're in Exodus chapter 16, and we have some questions for you about Exodus 16. What was the next complaint that the Israelites made when they entered into the wilderness? What was the next complaint that the people had? Remember, they were thirsty, and they had to have water purified for them. What was their next complaint? Question number 2. Who started the conversation between Moses and God when this next complaint came? Who started the conversation between God and Moses when the next complaint came? Question number 3. What was the test that God said he would supply for the people of Israel? What was the test that he said he would supply? Chapter 16, what test did he give them? Question number 4. And as we think about all of the reappearing sayings in the scriptures and so on, what was the message that God gave to the people of Israel again in chapter 16? Finally, number 5, why is it that we don't see the rebellion of the people about only having manna to eat? Why don't we see that here in this section of Exodus? Well, let's take a look at these questions. The people grumbled. It was about a month and a half after their last grumbling, and they grumbled again this time because they were hungry. Well, it was a lot of people. Most theologians speculate someplace around 1 million people that had left Egypt. And that's a lot of people to feed, isn't it? And so they grumbled about not having anything to eat. Who started the conversation about that problem? God did. It tells us in verse 4 of chapter 16, God came to Moses and said, I'll rain bread from heaven. I'll rain bread from heaven. We sing songs like Bread of Heaven, Feed Me Till I Want No More. And that's where it comes from, because God said he would rain bread from heaven. What was the test? The test was really quite interesting. It was a multifaceted test. The test was about greed. Would they follow God's instruction to only gather what they really needed? It was about obedience. Would they follow God's instruction to take one day's supply all the way through Monday through Friday, but on Saturday to gather together 2 days' supply, and to count on that to not spoil so that they wouldn't have to work on the Sabbath. And so it was a test of greed, it was a test of obedience, and God set it before them. It's really quite interesting because in Exodus, as I was reading through, and it said that he provided them bread in the morning and quail at night, I thought, well, what happened to the complaining about only manna to eat? And that story is found in the book of Numbers, which brought me to an interesting point to bring out to you again. Many times when we read books of the Bible, we need to read them in groups because you see, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers go together. They're not sequential books. Numbers didn't happen after Exodus, and Leviticus didn't happen after Exodus. They happened simultaneously, if you will. And so it's important for us to read that. Also, it's important in the Gospels to read the parallel passages of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You can learn a great deal more when you read the same events depicted in each of the Gospels. You'll find out additional information. What was the miracle of supply? Of course, it was the manna and the quail, and it happened for 40 years. So what was the other test? The other test, besides greed and obedience, was, will you trust me over the long haul? 40 years supply of manna. That's a pretty long time of supply, isn't it? Think God can take care of our needs from day to day. Give us this day our daily bread. Well, we certainly can see where Jesus would be quoting that because it's a test of our counting on God's supply, not just for day to day, but over the long haul of our life to trust in Him. Another part of the test. And what was the phrase that was found again? You'll look and see in verse 12. He's going to provide the bread, and He's going to provide it every day, and it's going to spoil if they gather too much, and it's going to stay overnight if it's the Sabbath. I mean, just think about that. One day, if you gather too much and it's not Saturday, or in this case, Friday for the Sabbath of Saturday, it's going to spoil by the next day. But if it's needed for the Sabbath, then it will stay all right. As a matter of fact, a pot of manna was taken out and put in a jar, and God said, just keep it for all of the generations. So that was never going to spoil. I mean, what kind of testimony that would be if you opened a jar and there was all kinds of maggots and worms in it, like would happen if they gathered too much. And speaking about too much, you probably wonder what an omer full is. It's about 2 quarts, just a little bit more than 2 quarts for each person was to be gathered. That's quite a bit. Probably as much as we would really need today, without saying supersize that. And then finally, what was that phrase? I'm going to supply the manna so they'll know I am the Lord. There's that phrase again, that they'll know that I am the Lord. Isn't it interesting how many times He uses that over and over again? So what can you learn from this? Well, it's your thought for the day. Greed, obedience, trusting over the long haul God, so that you know that He is God. It's your thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.